Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. We're about to start the webinar. As always, we'll give it a minute for people to log in. And as always, I would love to know where you guys are joining us from. So if you feel like it, you might want to write in the chat where you are from and why you're so interested in accessibility, whether you have any questions for our speakers, and so on. We'll start in a minute, more or less. Hi, Despina. Okay, so we have Athens online. Let's see whether the others join in.
I see some Dell folks joining as well.
Salt Lake City, Denmark. That's great. Boston, okay, a colleague of yours apparently supporting you. That's wonderful. Wisconsin, okay. Okay, well, keep the messages coming. Hi, Carolina in Germany. Keep the messages coming while I do my intro and give some support to Gwen and Ralph. So hello, everyone, and welcome to today's GALA's webinar. My name is Isabella Massardo. I'm content strategist here at GALA. And today we're going to talk about accessibility. You see today's speakers on the screen, Gwenola Trystram and Ralph Jung. They are part of the Dell Global Translation Services, and they are going to tell us about their journey towards accessibility. Just a little bit about the speakers. So Gwenola Trystram is engagement manager at Dell, and she ensures that all the facets of the business can benefit from the localization best practices, from maximizing Dell's global presence and revenue. She also supports the design and implementation of a language strategy across the business. In 2021, Gwen has onboarded an executive coaching certification journey and is now an active member of Dell Mentoring Program. Ralph Jung has been with Dell Technologies for the past 12 years, where he established the video localization program for product launches on Dell.com, which has since been extended and adapted to fit the needs of many other teams. As part of his job, he developed a patent in the area of video localization, which was granted by the US Patent Office in 2019. Ralph currently holds a consultant position with the Dell Global Translation team, where he focuses on enhancing the company's capabilities in the area of localization and accessibility of video, interactive media, and SEO. In short, you guys are in for a great treat. Feel free to use the QA box to submit your questions, and of course, use the chat to comment or share your experiences. The webinar will be recorded. I will send you a follow-up email with the link to the recording as soon as it is published on our website. Gwen and Ralph, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Isabella. Okay. So thanks everyone for joining today. I'll start by quickly going through the topics that we're going to cover. So we're going to tell you a little bit about who Dell is and who we are as a translation team. We're going to explain to you why accessibility matters. We'll talk a little bit about where we are as a company and the most significant challenges that we have identified with regards to accessibility, and specifically with a view to localization. We will go through some of the actions that we have already taken and that we are still planning. And we'll also do a quick recap of the takeaways. And then we're hoping to leave you with a positive outlook on the future. Gwen will now talk you through Dell as a company and the Dell translation team.
Hi, everyone. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you listening to us. Thank you for the slides. I'll switch to off camera. Before we dive into the subject, some essentials about Dell Technologies. Dell is $100 billion revenue company with the headquarters in Austin, Texas, and we have more than 125,000 employees worldwide in more or less 30 geographies. So Dell is very well known for selling PCs, and we sell quite a lot, as you can see, but it's best known for consumer products like PCs, also laptop, desktop monitors, accessories, etc. But a large part of the business is actually focusing on enterprise and commercial segments. Of course, we sell laptops to those segments, but servers, networking, storage, security, cybersecurity services, cloud by design, etc. And the reason why we say this is because we sell a lot through the e-commerce platform, and we're moving more and more of those products and services through our e-commerce platform. And that's why accessibility is really a key focus for us at the moment. Let's zoom now into our team, where Ralph and I work. We work into a team called Content Engineering and Translation, and we are consultant in the translation team. We sit under the product organization, but we actually serve all areas of the business. We have multi-vendor ecosystem. We process more than 600 million words every year in 30 plus languages. And Ralph will now show you some example of the content that we process that need accessibility. And you can see at the bottom here of the screen a couple of product or logos that you might be familiar with: Latitude, Curved, sleek high-end screens, XPS and Alienware, very, very famous. They all are Dell brands. Dell, over to you. Sorry, Ralph, over to you.
Okay, so before talking about accessibility challenges, it's a good idea to have a look at the various types of content that require special treatment in order to make them accessible to the biggest possible audience. So people with disabilities may navigate a website entirely by using their keyboard or alternative input devices like the kind of finger mouse you can see there. And they may only be able to perceive your content through a screen reader that uses text-to-speech to read out the text on the page. Alternatively, they can also be using a Braille device, for instance, as you can see on the top right picture, which provides them the information in Braille that they can feel with their fingers. To make sure that they can get an equivalent experience to as users without accessibility needs, it's important that websites present their structure as well as their content in ways that make them perceivable and actionable by everyone. So for this purpose, Dell has committed 2 years ago to following the WCAG standard 2.1 AA. So, and what does it mean? Well, let me give you some examples. It means, for instance, that HTML code needs to be structured properly. For example, by having proper headers that show the hierarchy of the page. The use of these kind of tags improves the navigation, and users can then, for example, click or skip selections that are not relevant to them. Within each of these sections, you also need to make sure that you use proper paragraphs, a meaningful link text. So not just click here, but something that tells the user what the link goes to. And also tables should have proper row and column headers to identify what the information is that they're that is being read to them. A good navigation is absolutely crucial. So check that all controls and menus can be used without a mouse, and that using the tab key, for instance, moves the focus to the next logical place on the page. When it comes to multimedia content like images, video, and audio, You have to make sure that you always offer transcripts or captions, and that you provide alternative descriptions for people who are visually impaired. PDF documents are a whole accessibility project on their own. And just like with HTML, you should probably create a semantic structure by tagging all the headings and sections in a way that makes logical sense. And it's also best to include summaries for certain elements, like tables, so the user doesn't have to have the entire table read to them, but can skip them if necessary. For navigation of PDF documents, they typically use internal bookmarks. And Gwen will now tell you a little bit more about why these things matter to everyone and not just people with disabilities.
Thanks, Rolf. Yeah. So can you move maybe to the next slide so we can see? Yeah. So why does it even matter? So instead of recreating the wheel I took from the Microsoft website, they have a really good section on their initiatives around accessibility. And they have this very simple, clear description on the different types of accessibility challenges. So obviously it can be situational, temporary, permanent. And we could think of even more of categories there, like cerebral palsy, autism spectrum, people who are multitasking, etc. So it's quite a relatable categorization, and it's actually safe to say that we are individually, we have been, or we will be in one of those categories at some point in our lives. And the accessible products and the online experience actually benefits everyone. So that's why it matters, because it affects all of us. So if you want to move to the next slide. So if you or your customers or your stakeholders, you're not yet convinced, here is some food for thought. That's what we're using when we initiate accessibility conversations with our own stakeholders. And when we say our stakeholders, they are people who consume translation and go through us. So we provide translation or language-related services. So that can be the marketing team, the product team, legal, R&D, security, compliance, etc. So that's what we have been using when we engage with those stakeholders. So you can think first of the legal aspect. That's the obvious one, right? The liabilities. So the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, and other affiliated acts provision high compensation, so fine, penalties, which is usually followed by all the jurisdictions. And in the US alone, we found that there is more than 10,000 lawsuits per year on average. And the WCAG standards are used worldwide as a reference. So the legal risks in the US are not in the US only, they are ported wherever the company or your company does business. So the risk expands. Beyond the legal risk, there is also the business opportunity. Just like with diversity and inclusion, the organizations are shifting their mindset about accessibility. And we have seen that with our own stakeholders. What has been seen as a frustrating challenge is now recognized as a real business opportunity. And how can we measure that? How can we describe it and talk about it to our stakeholders? We typically use some key numbers. Like in the US, 26% of the adults are reported to have a disability. And it goes up to 40% among the population who is over 60 years of age. So it's a large population that we are not even addressing or just ignoring in terms of business. So if you deep dive into the loyalty and the brand of the part of the business, just a few considerations. Findability. So what does it mean? improving accessibility can actually improve the search engine placement and increase the traffic on your website. What is good for accessibility is also good for SEO results. The ranking, the accessible user experience leads to more positive ranking, but also to more positive reviews in the press. The blind spot, so what that one is a concept we have been struggling. We didn't know how to address it, and because there is no tangible way to measure it because it's blind, so you actually can't see what you don't know what you don't know. So what corporations might be aware of but have a really hard time quantifying. And why is that? It's because some studies show that 97% of the users facing a digital issue related to a disability will never report it to customer service or via a satisfaction survey. So a company who is not doing enough doesn't know the impact it has. There's the lack of accessibility. The lack of accessibility can degrade the sales performance due to non-returning customers or due to aborted transactions. And the numbers we have found here is 71% of the people with a disability will abandon a website that presents them with an access barrier. They try and then they just drop. And 80% of these customers will spend their money not necessarily on the website that offers the cheapest products, but where fewest barriers are placed on their way. How frustrating can that be when you put so much effort to develop great features, you position your product on the market with the best pricing and the best design that you think is the best design, but you're not able to sell it because the online experience fails? And on the customer end, how frustrating is that when you find the product that meets your needs and your budget, but you're not able to finalize your shopping cart, for example? So that's where what we have observed around us, the risks and how we approach or we start the conversation with our stakeholders. But in order for us to better understand where you guys are, Isabella is going to run a short survey now.
Okay, you should be able to see the survey on the screen. Let's give it another 30 seconds. I see that.
And
there's a lot
maybe
of
for
text.
yeah, maybe for those who are not familiar with this abbreviation, A11Y stands for accessibility.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, a few more seconds. Almost there. Or maybe there are people who can't find the right answer for them. Maybe they're just starting now and they joined the webinar to know more. So in that case, just write in the chat for us. Okay, I'm going to close the survey. 1, 2, and 3. And here are the results. Okay, so emerging is 33%, explorer 47%, adopter 20%.
Okay, that's very interesting. It's so we're not too far off from the rest of the market or the industry, I should say. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Shall I launch the second one?
Oh yes, yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Let's do the second one.
Okay, here we go. Almost there. Okay. I'm going to close at the count of 3. 1 and 2, 3. Okay. And we have none for 13%, contributor 75%, and 13 leader.
Mm-hmm.
Not bad.
That's great to know. So most people are contributors in their own organization, and there's even 2 whose main job it is. So that's interesting to know. So where is Dell at the moment? Our current understanding places Dell at the explorer stage of maturity in accessibility. So what does that mean for us? Well, in 2021, Dell was ranked 115,596 out of 1 million websites. That is not a very good outcome. And if you fast forward from that to 2022, we suddenly jumped to rank 55,788. So it's clear that even if you make some small progress, you can make significant leaps in usability and accessibility for people who need accessibility features. And it also signals our ongoing commitment to adapt, grow, and improve accessibility for the users. We've made it our immediate objective to make our customer-facing website accessible. So here's how we've charted our course. In 2021, it was primarily about taking a self-check and see where we are in terms of accessibility, and about raising awareness that we're going to start this journey. In 2022, then our focus shifted to optimizing the browsing and purchasing experience, also known as the customer journey. We started implementing some of the insights gathered from our earlier audits from the previous year. This year, one of our main objectives is to enhance the multimedia experience. So this includes incorporating closed captions into more videos, and also partnering with audio description vendors to make content more accessible to people who are blind or have eyesight problems. Audio descriptions are where there is a separate audio track that describes what visually happens on the screen. So next year, then finally, we are planning to look at our processes for technical documentation, as well as e-learning materials and knowledge-based articles. To achieve these objectives, we also established the Dell Accessibility Center of Excellence in 2021. This is a pan-Dell dedicated team with a mission. They define our best practices, including in product design, and in web and asset development. They raise awareness through continuous training and regular reviews, and by educating all the other teams. They develop tools to build better experiences. So from auditing tools to health checks and various other support tools. And then also they run the audits on our websites, some of which are done through external companies, but we also have internal resources for this. And so with regular guidance and recommendations from this team, we try to continually evolve our accessibility standards every year. So all in all, Dell's journey towards better accessibility and inclusivity is well underway, which means that in about 2 to 3 years, we hope to reach what we call the adopter stage, which is the next stage in our journey. And let me now take you to some of the challenges that we have encountered over the past 2 years on the next slide. Okay. So what is the role of the translation team in the broader landscape of accessibility, and what are the main challenges and gaps we have identified? in the collaboration with accessibility teams. So we're not obviously the owner of the accessibility roadmap for Dell, and the translation team therefore plays a vital role in the content lifecycle and in supporting the accessibility team in this. We serve our stakeholder by developing and implementing best practices and processes in translation, which directly impact accessibility. So what are some of the actual challenges that we have encountered? So we're part of a very large company, and this means that there are many teams that produce content, and all of that content needs to be accessible. Then all teams have their own existing guidelines already, and they might follow accessibility best practices to varying degrees, so it's not consistent. In Dell, we also use a plethora of content creation and content management systems, each with their own unique challenges. And the services offered by our language service providers are themselves also at varying degrees of maturity when it comes to accessibility. Within large organizations like Dell, it can also sometimes be quite unclear who owns different parts of the accessibility experience. And while executives' sponsorship exists for factors like inclusivity, SEO, and revenue, it's not always quite clear as for accessibility itself. So budgeting of accessibility remains challenging also for many teams, and the available budgets often tend to prioritize scaling the more measurable interest of the team over accessibility, because we often don't know what we don't know, as Gwen says, that how many users we have that need accessibility, how often they visit the site, and so on. That's something that is obviously not available through analytics. From a technical standpoint, not all content creation systems offer the same level of support for accessibility features. And as an important example for multimedia, external publishing platforms don't always support multiple audio tracks or even closed captions. For instance, if we're talking about some of the social media platforms, they all have different levels of support for accessibility. Many of the areas that require more training are technical in nature, but it's also important to create more awareness around the benefits of for the business, and also to make sure that everyone has a personal responsibility to make accessibility work in their area. Depending on their area of work, employees need to also make sure that they keep their own content accessible by default. If we want to move it forward, it's important for us to acknowledge these challenges, not as roadblocks, but as opportunities for improvement and collaboration. So even within big organizations like Dell. So now that we know where Dell is as a company, Gwen is going to look at where that leaves us as a translation team.
Yeah, let's have a look at how we have approached accessibility in our team. So it started with one of our key stakeholders, the events department under marketing. You may have heard actually about this journey already on other platforms or through the GALA conference with Aki Ayashi, who is a senior manager in our team. So it started with the preparation of Dell Technologies Word and the need to create an inclusive end-to-end journey for the attendees. And for those who might not know, Dell Technologies World is the annual 3 days event. It's live in Las Vegas with 20,000 attendees in the venue and 3.7 million live stream views. So the event teams, so what they wanted is us to combine audio description, card services, closed captioning, sign languages, and audio description, audio interpretation, even without talking about the accessibility portion of the of the multimedia videos and maybe documentation downloadables. So we wanted to respond to those needs, but then we realized that it was not enough to just accumulate the services. We had to make it relevant for the real audience. And we wanted the attendee to be made aware in their language that an accessibility services was available to them. And we wanted to provide the service from the first interaction point. So for example, when they read about it in social media or when they receive a launch email, up during the venue, the event, and also post-event, to create a real end-to-end. And the major hurdle we started with was capturing the attendees' accessibility needs at the registration stage. That's ideal, but that poses a major GDPR challenge. And by the way, we haven't solved that yet. So we started to explore and assess our own capabilities, our own understanding of what accessibility was. So because, again, providing a series of accumulate the different services of accessibility would not probably make a great user experience and would generate cost that our events team would probably not be able to cover. So we started to explore, and most of the requirements were new to us, and we had to learn fast. And I would like here to say that it's been really a team effort from the beginning, from our project managers volunteering to self-train, raise aware, lead SOWs with our suppliers, engaging conversations with the stakeholders, testing available tools on the market, etc. So it's been really an ongoing self-learning effort. And our first observation was that the LSPs, so language service providers in general on the market, were not prepared to deliver those services as a package to us. And most, they provide interpretation, all of them provide closed captioning, but we were actually the first enterprise level customer to ask for such a large portfolio of accessibility services. Our second observation was that we should find the right place for ourselves. And because in the beginning, we invested a lot of energy in considering PDF remediation, for example, as part of the localization process. Probably not the best option. We devised on how to position the cost and how to adapt the SLAs. And then we realized that accessibility has so many facets. You cannot simply just add a step in a model that's driven by cost per word and where SLA is defined by the number of words. That's the model we are in, and making those changes right away by adding a service as complex as accessibility was simply not working. So it's much more complex than that. That's really our lesson. And then the next step was to build the solution. So it's more or less the adopting stage, if you will. That's a continuous effort with our LSPs and our stakeholders. Today, I think you mentioned it, Rolf, already. Our position is really clear. We're not accessibility implementers. We're not accessibility owners. We're facilitators. Other stakeholders in our company are not as advanced as the events team, and a lot of awareness and convincing will be necessary in the future. It's really an ongoing effort. And we advise our stakeholders, so Dell offers an accessible experience while not overwhelming the users and remaining within budget. So that's really our role. We are engaged in the long term with the procurement team to ensure Dell onboards the right ecosystem of accessibility suppliers. We also position ourselves in an advisory role, and we try to think end-to-end whenever possible. We see our added value in the growing demand to fix the disjointed experience with multimedia content. And by the way, when we started to talk about Dell Technology World, this year, the team provided sync signing during the music show. So neither Ralph and I could attend, but we saw videos of the expert who were signing, and she was not only signing the lyrics, but also the energy of the music, and it was really impressive. So for our team, it's really about pushing beyond the traditional localization definition of how we've been known for in the past, and evolving toward the trailblazer role if we can. So that's what we're targeting. If you move to the next slide, because we want to be known for much more than translation, and we are supporting our stakeholders and influencing our partners, so our language service providers, but we will not take accountability for accessibility compliance. That's for our stakeholders and content owners to do. But what can we do to support their journey? So that's where we want to work, involving our LSPs in our journey. We can't do that on our own. We also need to define how and when we communicate with our stakeholders. Educating and pushing information is great, but it might not always be the right time for them. Continue to build a pool of suppliers who are able to deliver. It could be LSPs and much more. Work with procurement. It's really an ally for us to change the selection criteria and the requirements for the agencies. If the content by default that we get from creative agencies is not compliant with accessibility requirements, it adds up, extra fixes, remediation for everyone. In terms of accountability, what we want to do, and we've started to do that, is provide audits and competitive analysis. By looking at what the competitors do, we can equip our stakeholders and their decision makers with data to make informed decisions and trigger conversations at their level. We also need to update our style guide to make sure that whatever we ask for in terms of linguistic or branding, look and feel quality is not impacting or degrading the accessibility scores. We also need to have conversation with our stakeholders on SLAs, because if accessibility is made part of the workflows of translation, then there is an impact on SLAs, and stakeholders need to be aware and plan for that. In terms of technology, automation, really testing, so that's how can we benefit really, and what can automation bring to the transcription or the card services for an acceptable quality and at a minimum cost. We also want to look at optimized closed captioning workflows, in order to avoid to pile up different services from different providers. What can machine translation and Gen AI bring, and by when can we get that? Those are open questions at the moment, you can imagine. In terms of training and awareness, we want to increase the number of ACE certified champions. So ACE stands for Accessibility Center of Excellence, and actually this group has developed an in-house certification level. So you have ACE 1, ACE 2, and in the future will be ACE 3. It's being developed at the moment, and what we want is our team to be ACE 2 level. For now, most of them are L1. We also want to guide the first steps taken by our stakeholders, educating them and telling them, oh, you should do this and that. It's a bit overwhelming for those who really want to deep dive into it. So helping them, understanding what is the next step for them, awareness, training, and then maybe talk to their agencies, maybe update the roadmap of their product, revisit the tools they are using on hosting the videos, etc., to help them, have a perspective into their journey. Then advise on inclusive end-to-end multimedia journey. Again, it's not about buying everything that's possible into accessibility, but deliver something that makes sense for the audience. And also make sure and insist over and over again that video accessibility is not just about closed caption. It's way more. Ralph, would you like to take us through, the next steps? Yeah, what can be transferred into everything we said here to a localization specialist outside of to a wider audience?
Sure. So whether you work for a small or a big organization, let's look at some of the potential action items that some of you may want to consider. So first of all, I would recommend that you make sure to define your scope of involvement. So we all have a lot of work to do already, and so don't make it too broad. In Dell, we see ourselves more as guides in this area. So we try to support our stakeholders in finding the right information. We'll point them towards the experts, but we don't take an overly active role in trying to make other teams adopt accessibility. The best approach here is to talk to your stakeholders and to set expectations together. And also, I think Gwen mentioned some of these already. The capabilities of our language service providers are also important here. So look at them and what services you might potentially need to outsource to other specialized platforms. So like, for instance, video workflow platforms and video accessibility providers. Make sure you also include accessibility tools and services in your budget plans, because they will cost extra in different areas. And where possible, give stakeholders the tools to achieve their goals by themselves. So this is the self-serve model, as we call it. When it comes to accountability, make sure that you clearly define who is responsible for creating the content, for translating it, and for ensuring that it stays accessible throughout that whole process. Because that is not a given. It's not guaranteed that if you translate something, that it will stay accessible after the translation. So that obviously has to be looked at separately. For complex types of content, there exist so-called remediation services that Gwen already mentioned. These are specialized companies or departments of service providers that make content accessible after the fact. And then also having your management on your side and endorse the accessibility is a big plus. So make sure you get them on your side. When it comes to turnaround times, consider how accessibility requirements may affect your service level agreements. So if you have extra quality checks and stuff like that, it will affect the time needed for the content to be turned around. And lastly, discuss the need for stakeholders to increase their budget to cover accessibility requirements. If you work a lot with external agencies, accessibility requirements should probably be part of their contract as well. On the technology side, content creation systems may need to be updated, or features may need to be enabled on a global level to make that work. And CAT tools and workflow tools, or TMSs, for instance, need to be capable of handling accessible content, like, for instance, alt text of a document. It needs to be exposed as translatable strings to the translators. You probably need to incorporate accessibility checks in your quality assurance processes. And for some purposes, built-in accessibility features of platforms like Zoom and Teams may be enough. But there are also specialized vendors that provide plugins for instance, transcription or translation that may provide a better user experience, especially if it's a high visibility one. You'll also need to define in which cases machine translation could be adequate for your content where accuracy might not be as critical. Just as with localization, accessibility should never be an afterthought or something that just happens at the end of the process. It needs to be part of your stakeholders' planning, so make sure to have it included from the get-go. When it comes to training, there are obviously generic introductions to accessibility, but there are also many specialized trainings for instance, developer roles and content creator roles and so on. Those are worthwhile looking into. As with localization in general, accessibility also benefits from using simple, straightforward language, which in turn is also good for search engine optimization. So they all kind of, the three of them fit very well together. Do your stakeholders actually understand the causal relationship between being compliant and achieving business success? I mean, in addition to being good for inclusion and public perception of your organization, there are also many other ways your organization can benefit, as we've already talked about a bit. So obviously your product or service will be available to more people, and you will also be less vulnerable to legal risks from lawsuits. So now, how should we deal with pushback or excuses? So that might happen as well. Not everyone is equally interested in taking on extra work, obviously. And so I think the most important strategy is to know the benefits of accessibility in and out, so we can convince everyone else and be prepared for their questions. It also helps to bring experts into the discussion. So if your organization doesn't have dedicated accessibility experts, you might want to consider getting some external help. In Dell, we regularly also invite subject matter experts from other companies to share their views with our teams. That might also be a good way to get started. I hope that this checklist gave you all some ideas for what to do next. And Gwen will now summarize the main takeaways of the webinar.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Rolf. So we all have to play our part. That's really what we have learned and what we're convinced of. Keep learning through training, through readings, be aware of what's around you, what needs to be accessible in your area of expertise. It can be quite, unique to your role. Plan from the start. Just like you approach internationalization, try to have a seat at the table at the start of a project. It can be more than 100 times more expensive to fix a release product than making it accessible in the first place. We know it's difficult, but that's really the goal. If you are a buyer, work with your LSPs to build an accessible portfolio of services. If you are an LSP, work with your client to position your capabilities. Know the market, identify the best accessibility vendors for you, whether it's CART, remediation, closed captioning, sign language, and sign is not just American Sign Language, it is unique to every language, branding, graphic chart, etc. It's accessibility is very vast here. Keep learning through different types of trainings. Read relevant industry news and learn from others. That's what Ralph was mentioning about inviting other SMEs and other key players in the industry to learn from them. Work with third-party agencies. Ensure their output. If you do that, if you work with third-party agencies, ensure their output is natively accessible. If not, work with procurement. They are your ally here. LSPs also need to be aware of their clients' accessibility needs and how to make or how to keep localized content accessible. That's where maybe LSPs have a role to support their customers' journey. Ralph, what are the short-term perspectives? Because that is very generic, but what are the short-term perspectives that you see on the market that you would like to share with our audience today?
Okay, so I realize we're close to the full hour, so I'll try to make it short. Now, obviously, you can't give a presentation these days and not mention AI. So whatever the hype around ChatGPT and the other large language models, there's no question about whether it will influence the areas of localization and accessibility, because it definitely will. The first point on this slide here, and I think we might share it in the chat after this, is a link to a LinkedIn post about an AI avatar that we used for Dell Technology World. For brevity's sake, I think I'm not going to explain too much of that now, but have a look at it. It's a video, and it's really good. AI automation also means 24/7 around the clock availability of, for instance, customer support in most languages. So we are currently even testing automated sign language solutions where text is converted to the proper hand gestures, for example, in the American, British, and Irish sign languages. Developments in AI also mean that some things that were previously difficult to automate are now within reach. So there are likely going to be better tools for detecting accessibility issues in your content. Other examples are advances in text-to-speech and computer vision. So these can be used, for instance, to automatically create more accurate descriptions of content in images, but also spoken descriptions of objects and activities in video or movie, in a video or movie. These are known also as audio descriptions. Speech recognition is also getting more accurate by the year, and it also is it's getting context aware. So misheard words can now be identified, for instance, by generative AI, because it can take the context of the entire file into account, and so it will know when a word is out of place compared to the rest of the content. So with these points, we wanted to leave you with a positive outlook on accessibility and technology. And I think we can now move on to taking questions from the audience. Isabella?
Well, thank you so much. That was very interesting. Let's see. I'm going to switch on my camera just for a second. And there you are, guys. If anyone has any question, you can type them either in the chat box or in the QA box, up to you what you prefer. I want to thank you guys. It was a really interesting presentation. I was almost shocked, I would say, that when you mentioned, Gwen, that 26% of adults in the US alone have a disability. That is a lot. That is a lot. And you're right, it's something that concerns all of us, because sooner or later we might have that health issues. And I'm also glad that Ralph included something about AI, because it is said nowadays that AI can be finally let's say the great equalizer, making everything accessible for everyone. Is that how you see it, based on your recent tests or experiments? I don't know whether you guys have been very busy or just a little bit busy with AI. What can you say about that? Are there challenges, or is it all rosy?
I think AI definitely has an opportunity to make a lot of things more accessible, but it's not yet a magic wand, so it cannot do everything yet. There are still some hurdles to overcome. People are already creating, for instance, like agents that can do things based on AI instructions. So basically, the AI writes instructions for like a program to do something, and that actually happens then automatically as part of the prompt. So yeah, I think there's a lot that can be done now with AI, but not everything yet. So
yeah,
we're still going to have some work for us.
Yeah, exactly. And Gwen, I was interested, you said, regarding the world event that you guys organize. And by the way, you mentioned your colleague Aki Ayashi. We have an interview with her coming up. This is more for attendees. So keep an eye on our website, our newsletters, and our social media. We'll publish the interview with Aki Ayashi very soon. And she talks about total event management, by the way. So
she's also on this call, by the way.
And she's also on this call. Oh, okay. Is she? Oh, yeah. Hi, Aki. Yes, I can see there. But Gwen, you mentioned that LSPs were not prepared. I mean, what's your experience? Are LSPs reluctant to take an interest in accessibility because of lack of resources, or is there something else? Are there other roadblocks?
Yeah, so the experience and the relationship we have with our suppliers is they're always willing to explore whatever we show them, whatever we ask. They're always in for it, right? But I think it's not their core area, and the ones we're working with are major, large global suppliers. But accessibility as a service is not their core business. It will become at some point part of their standard portfolio, but when we started to engage with them, it was not an area they were equipped with, but they've been very interested in. The thing is, when it's not your organically, it's not part of your service, you build it for your client. But if you don't have the resources or knowledge in-house, you will outsource it, you don't control it, so the cost might not be the best for your client. So that is probably the first challenge that they have been facing, and also learning on themselves, because it was not a standard service. They also had to educate themselves on what is it exactly, which type of resources can do it. Do they have to fully outsource the service? Can they get the service in-house? You know, what is the most profitable model for them as well? That also takes time to get organized. So that's would be my response to you.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned the service level agreement model based on a word count, basically, is something that needs to be, let's say, revised when accessibility surveys are also introduced. But for the LSPs who haven't started yet, are there any, because you mentioned, you know, bringing in experts, etc. But before that, are there any organizations, for example, non-profit organizations, etc., or resources that LSPs can turn to start, you know, documenting themselves, informing themselves about accessibility, other standards that need to be taken into consideration?
Yes, so that's what Ralph mentioned earlier. There's the WCAG. So it's what Dell wants to comply with globally is the WCAG 2.1 AA standard. And in the future, there will be a 2.2, but it's not widely adopted yet. And that is that's our guiding star, if you will. And this is an American standard, but most of the countries in the world, the European Union, China, Japan, etc., they all have their own standard, but it's derived actually from the WCAG standards. So it's the understanding of accessibility is actually commonly understood globally.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned the different challenges. Of all the challenges that you guys had to face, which one was the biggest, Ralph?
I think getting other teams to adopt the things that are available. So, for instance, we have been introducing audio descriptions as a service. So we onboarded vendors that offer these kinds of services, and so we can do it. But it's obviously difficult for budgeting, for you have to change your processes and so on. So we have to make sure that all the teams know about this, and that they know it's kind of a legal requirement now, but it's not as enforced as we would like it to be.
Yeah, and for you, Gwen?
Yeah, I totally relate to that. It's we had to try to learn ourselves about what it is, what it entails. It was much bigger than what we thought initially, and then once we were convinced it was the right thing to do, and the next step for, you know, expanding also our own footprint in the company, we found that it was not as a priority. for the other stakeholders, and it was like a bit of impatience. But that's the right thing to do. Go for it. But the business has also budget and priorities and roadmap and limitations. So how can we make them a partner in this accessibility journey?
Yeah,
that's, I think, and it's not finished really. It's an ongoing thing.
Exactly. And next step, the step that you're looking forward to in the future, which one is it?
I'm going to be radical here. I'm going to say I would love accessibility to become a requirement no matter what. A requirement full stop. That would be perfect.
I second that. Yes.
Okay, well, on that, then I want to thank you again. It was a great presentation. And I hope you'll come back and tell us more of your journey towards, 200% accessibility. And all your experiments with AI and accessibility. I'm really looking forward to that. And thank you to all attendees. As always, when I close the webinar, you'll see a post-webinar survey. So please, you'll take only 10 minutes. Tell us what you thought of this presentation. Suggest other topics for future webinars. And also let us know whether you yourself would be interested in presenting. Thank you again, everybody. Have a good day or a good evening, depending on where you are. And I hope to see you soon at another GALA webinar. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.